You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 133. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hello all and welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to talk about shame, but not in terms of shame about what you're doing, right? Not about the half bottle of wine you drink every night, even when you know you don't want to. No, I'm going to talk today about shaming yourself into doing something about that, right? About the drinking. Because I hear this so often, people talking about having to really just guilt and shame themselves into change. And really, it doesn't work, right? It's kind of like the headline, at least not over the long term, right? Because you really cannot shame yourself into self-improvement, into doing better, or into getting from where you are now to where you want to go. Now, I'm going to tell you what happens when you try this and why this approach doesn't work, and then we're going to talk about what to do instead. Now, listen, guilt tripping or shaming yourself into taking action may work temporarily. You might see a slight uptick, you might make a little headway, but it won't last for long. And here is why. When we think about ourselves negatively, right, when we feel shame about ourselves and what we're doing, the action we're taking, we feel negatively, right? We feel things like disappointed, frustrated, guilty, ashamed, inadequate, fed up. I mean, you name it, you're going to experience it. And when we feel those kinds of negative feelings, guess what we do? Well, think about what you do, right? We take negative actions. We procrastinate, we self-sabotage, right? We avoid, we hide, we resist, we distract, we do all that stuff. And it all feels terrible. We don't like how any of that feels. And so then guess what? This is the humdinger. We then do the thing we've taught ourselves to do when we feel like rubbish. We distract ourselves with immediate pleasures and we reward ourselves with instant gratification to feel better in the moment. Otherwise translated as we drink too many glasses of wine, we have a G&T as a treat, or maybe an extra glass of wine or a beer or two just to kick back, right? We just do the thing that we're wishing we wouldn't do, because we've been shaming ourselves into the fact that we can't do anything about this thing. I mean, it's one big ball of wax, messy, negative feelings. In addition to having, the extra drinks, you may also throw in for good measure. You might snack a lot more. I know a lot of people go for the chips or crisps, as we would say in the UK, or eat the cookies, scroll on social media, right? Not get down to the tasks that you need to do. We'll do anything just to feel better. We do all of those things to escape feeling awful. Another way you could look at this is that instead of doing something in that moment that actually would serve us, even something as simple as pausing to ask why we are pouring an extra glass of wine and what we could do instead, right? Pausing to accept that we are feeling tired or, fed up or stressed, right? Instead of doing that, we actually do nothing. We don't take any action to change the action, right? So we just follow through with the drinking thing without taking any kind of action that might interrupt the habit. And why do we do this? Because we have a thought running in the background and it's not going to work anyway. This probably isn't going to work. I read to do this thing. These other people swear by it, but I don't know. Not sure about it. Probably won't work for me. I've tried everything. Right? And we have all these messages. We've tried everything. Think how helpless you feel You've tried everything, but I really ought to be able to do it. There's the shame again, right? Shaming yourself into taking action to change. We're thinking and feeling all this. All of that feels awful. It's kind of like doubly, triply awful. I'm not sure how many feelings layered I've got to here. It's a lot of negative feelings about negative feelings. And it's all very heavy. It's another way of thinking about it, right? So let's say you're feeling deprived. You're not having the wine, so you're feeling all the deprived, all the restlessness. That's kind of one layer of feeling. Let's say on top of that, we then start to shame ourselves and say, well, I feel really guilty about the fact that I'm finding it so hard. And I listen to this podcast thing and I should know how to do it by now. So that's it's like another blanket, right? Another blanket of feelings. And then on top of that, we might think, oh yeah, I mean, you are so resourceful. You still haven't figured it out after how many years, right? We might start to feel despair. And you could just sort of pluck a feeling and you can layer it on top, and it's really heavy. I mean, it can feel like, imagine a really thick pile of heavy blankets on top of you. It's kind of paralyzing, right? If you're under all those blankets, you really can't move your body easily. We can't move. We're not going to be willing to take action if we're feeling all this blanket of negative feelings. Now, for starters, all these negative feelings, it's not going to create your desired results. Even if in the short term you're able to get some success, right? You can really battle through all the guilt and the shame and the disappointment and the despair. If you can battle through, it invariably means you're going to be relying on willpower. I mean, for sure, you're going to rely on willpower, which over the long term is hard. You know this. I've spoken about this many times, and it's miserable. It's going to remind you why you struggled to drink less before, right? We have all these negative connotations, and it certainly doesn't lead to long-lasting change. In order to make permanent change, here's what you've got to do instead. You ready? To write this down, you've got to drop the self-judgment and make peace with who you are. You may not like to do this. You may not want to do this. This may be really hard, but if you have any kind of resistance to the next few things I'm going to say, then that is proof that this is your work, right? I want you to make peace with who you are and with who you aren't. Make peace with where you are and with where you aren't. So for instance, if you're able to go to the party for 60 minutes and feel all right, but you can't do 90 minutes, I want you to make peace with that. We're not judging that we can't do 90 minutes. We're focusing on, oh my goodness, I can do the 60. I want you to make peace with what you are and with what you aren't, with what you're able to do and with what you are not yet able to do. And you may want to write this stuff out, right? Write out where you are and where you're not and really come to terms with that. You've got to love yourself as you level up. If that is a stretch, you have to at minimum like yourself as you level up. And remember, learning to drink less is a skill. It is only a skill to learn. This is not some character defect, right, that we're dealing with here. So liking yourself is the way forward. Shame isn't going to solve these problems. Self-loathing is not the solution here. It will just drive you into a pit of more negative feelings. You've got to get curious without criticism. I like that. Curious without the criticism. Just totally within your control. As we're talking about your criticism of you, you have access to all the information, all the data, to all the criticism, right? Every single thing that you think about yourself, you have access to it. So looking at that information, looking at your thoughts on this, I want you to explore what is causing the problem. You've got to understand yourself and then accept yourself, which is on the way to loving yourself. And only then can you make a change, a long-term lasting change. And if you can't seem to stop the self-shaming, even if you're trying really hard, let's say you're just doing all the stuff that I talk about, and if deep down you know that bullying yourself isn't how you're going to become your best self, I mean, yeah, I get it. I'm not fighting that, Anna. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to simply take a deep breath and then forgive yourself. And it can be an interesting exercise just to write those words out on paper. I love writing this stuff out. I forgive myself. I forgive myself for doubting myself. I forgive myself for all the bad things I've said. I'm just going to forgive and I'm going to move on. Forgiveness is an amazing feeling. Think of a time when you've forgiven somebody in your life for something that happened and how clean you feel and how you can maybe in a relationship, right? It can clean the slate and you can move forward. I want you to consider you can do that with yourself. And when you do this, what you're saying is it's okay. Right? It's okay, Anna, that you didn't know this. It's okay that you're where you are because you can learn another approach. You are not at the end of the road here. And for you, dear listener, I want you to think you are listening to this podcast. Maybe you've binged this podcast. Maybe you're new to it. And if you're new to it, go back and take your pick. There's a smorgasbord. Is that how you say that word? Anyway, a huge amount of topics to choose from. Just listening to this, and especially if you are doing some of the homework that I routinely give out, just that is itself a change. This is wiggling the habit. It's wiggling your approach just a little bit, right? It's kind of like the chink in the armor of the habit. Remember that habits run in our unconscious mind. They just kind of run on automatic, their default behavior. Anytime you're doing anything that is not part of the default behavior, you are changing the habit by a teeny tiny way. Those all add up. So if shaming yourself into change doesn't work, what does? Well, I said just now about the idea of forgiving yourself. That's truly very powerful. But here's some more action, some more ways of tackling this. You don't have to do them all, right? Just pick one. And these will work. Choosing to become courageous, to become resourceful, focused and deliberate. Those are all terrific emotions. Now, I would put disciplined in there too, for sure. But disciplined in the sense of doing what you said you will. Discipline not in the sense of, come on, Anna, you're such a screw up. Just get on and do it. Pull on your big girl pants, right? I don't mean that level of discipline, that type of discipline, which is why I didn't initially put it in the list. So, focus first on being courageous, resourceful, focused and deliberate. These are incredibly positive emotions, but not in the sickly sweet kind of way. Right? These are emotions that will have you taking positive action towards your goal, whatever it takes. So that is my call to arms. Here's your next piece of homework. Again, you don't have to do all of this. There's a lot. I want you to consider that being courageous starts now, right this second. Ask yourself, how can I be courageous today? Then do it. Just pick one thing. I want you to consider that being resourceful starts now. Now, many of my listeners, you are already very resourceful. So if that is you, I want you to consider being resourceful around, changing the drinking. How can you be resourceful today? Remember the podcast I had recently where that may actually involve becoming resourced in terms of not expecting that you could do this all yourself, if that is your go-to approach. The next call to arms is being focused. Starts right now. How can you be more focused today? Then go do it. And being deliberate starts now. How can you be deliberate today? And then go do that. Backing yourself starts right now. You need nobody's permission but your own. It is a beautiful thing because you are in effect deciding to be on your own team, even when perhaps you maybe don't like yourself much. And when I was putting this podcast together, this really made me think of all those days at school in the games lessons, right? We would play hockey or netball, didn't matter, whatever team sport it was, when there would be a time to choose the teams, right? I was rubbish at games. I was not a very good runner, catcher, thrower, hitter, you name it, not very good. And so I was not ever really chosen. It was excruciating. It's who's going to have Anna. It was me and one other girl. Who's going to have Anna and who's going to have Lorna, I think the other girl is called. So do you know what I did? And I'm actually kind of proud of 11-year-old Anna who figured this out. I turned it around. I decided to put myself in charge, and I ended up volunteering to be team captain. Think about it. It was genius. There was nothing in the rules that said you had to be good at sport to be the captain. The teacher just wanted a couple of volunteers. She'd either pick them or I'd put my hand up. And you know what? It felt so much better. It didn't change my prowess or lack of it at games, but I do know something else. I do know how it changed how I showed up. I know that I tried harder when it was during the game because I would pick my friends to be in my team who were also not that great at games. So it would kind of be us against the seriously sporty types. And Pippa, if you're out there listening to this, Pippa with the hockey stick coming herring towards me, she was probably the only exception I would make. I wouldn't go into a tackle with her. But generally speaking, we would try harder. It was more fun, right? It wasn't a trial. We were backing ourselves, and I certainly backed myself more. And I did get better. I did get better at it. And that all came from flipping the switch and deciding to put myself forward. You can do the same thing here. You are the captain of your life. Your dream life starts now. Pick yourself. And if you don't know how, or if you want to get there fast, you want to know the rules of the game, Anna, please tell me, how do I do it? I really want to do it. I want to be the captain, but I don't know. Then let's talk. We can consign this struggle to history. I want you to think about that. You wouldn't be sitting there worried about this ever again. You would know what to do. So you would continue to make forward progress and live the life you want without having shamed yourself into change. If you do want to talk with me, go to 90dayslater.co, click on the book a call button at the top. That will take you to a link in my calendar and we will chat. Now, if you're in a time zone that does not get a good call time reflected in my calendar, just send me an email, anna@90dayslater.co, and we'll make it work. I work with people all over the world. I'm totally able to modify my calendar to suit my clients. All right. So again, go to 90dayslater.co or email anna@90dayslater.co, and I will see you next week.